Force of nature. Jonathan Van Meter first interviewed Jane Fonda for VOGUE in 2001. In December, joining her climate action in Washington, he found her as formidable and aspiring as ever. Jane Fonda is the most intimidating person I've ever met. It was nearly 20 years ago, a week before George W. Bush's inauguration, when I arrived at the door of her hotel suite in Santa Monica to interview her for VOGUE. I remember an outstretched arm, "Hi, I'm Jane Fonda," a rigid handshake, and a once-over. No phony smile or "How nice to see you." As we sat down, I asked how much time I had. "Let's start with an hour," she said curtly. "No amount of friendly chit-chat. How about this rain?" Intimidating, внушающий страх. Синоним scary. Nearly, около. Outstretched, протянутая, протянутый, outstretched. Rigid, твердый, сухой, скупой, rigid. Once over, взгляд сверху вниз, оценивающий взгляд. Phony, фальшивый. Curtly, кратко. Chit-chat, пустая болтовня. Третья строчка сверху. W. Bush's inauguration. Мы читаем Bush's, хотя там нет звука И или буквы И. Такое происходит, когда у нас есть случаи родительного падежа с апострофом S, если слово заканчивается на шипящую. Тогда для удобства мы произнесем звук И, которого там нет. Bushes. Change the dynamic. Indeed, I had to fight the urge to flee. Only once I started asking direct, pointed questions and stopped wasting her time did things turn around, and she talked animatedly, sometimes wildly gesticulating, for over an hour. A woman Fonda once worked closely with in Atlanta had described her affect to me as a wave coming at you. "Well, I don't think I've crushed too many people," she said when I told her, looking a little hurt. The urge to flee. Желание сбежать. Direct and pointed questions. Прямые и конкретные вопросы. Animatedly. Оживленно. Did things turn around? Things turn around? Ситуация изменилась в лучшую сторону. Мы можем использовать вот эти вот словосочетания или даже целые фразы у себя в речи, просто адаптируя их немного под наш контекст или даже не адаптируя, просто используя в своих контекстах. Интересный случай инверсии. Did things turn around? Это и инверсия, потому что это не вопрос, но мы выставляем did перед подлежащим. Did things turn around? И также здесь did служит усилительной частицей. Когда мы хотим усилить смысл того, что мы говорим, мы используем вспомогательные глаголы в утвердительном предложении. Ну, например, мы можем сказать: «Да, я действительно с тобой согласен». «Я действительно это понимаю». I do agree. I do understand. Если в прошедшем времени, я действительно ее видел. I did see her. Обратим внимание на предложение, выделенное зеленым. A woman Fonda once worked closely with in Atlanta had described her affect to me. Fonda once worked closely with in Atlanta – это придаточное предложение. Оно находится в составе внутри главного предложения. A woman had described her affect to me. Придаточное предложение, которое находится здесь, это relative clause. Оно описывает главное, подлежащее, woman. Если в придаточных предложениях такого типа есть предлоги, то они будут стоять в конце этого придаточного предложения. In spoken English. В формальном английском они часто стоят в начале придаточного предложения. Например, She is the candidate with whom I had a discussion about the project. Informal. She is the candidate that I had a discussion with about the project. Можно that, в принципе, опустить. I had a discussion with. Как в нашем случае с Fonda. The project for which we are seeking funding aims to address environmental issues. Informal. The project that we are seeking funding for aims to address environmental issues. You can get out of the way and get scared, or you can get it and go with it. I think I was caught off guard by the chilly reception because I thought I had already passed some kind of test. In the spring and summer of '96, I fell into a social circle that included Vanessa Vadim, Fonda's daughter with director Roger Vadim, and Rory Kennedy, the documentary filmmaker and daughter of Robert Kennedy. It was a friend of a friend of a friend situation, and I took an instant liking to Vanessa. Like her mother, she seemed both brash and bashful at once, hiding her eyes behind the backs of a clued shag, ironically enough. To catch someone off guard, застать врасплох. Caught off guard, пойман врасплох. I took an instant liking to something or somebody. Мне сразу понравилось или понравился кто-то, что-то. Brash and bashful. Brash and bashful. Смелый и смущенный. A friend of a friend of a friend situation. Мы так часто говорим, да, это через знакомого, через десятые руки. Или друг моего друга мне сказал. То есть, когда мы не напрямую слышали, знаем информацию, а когда мы получили эту информацию через десятые, третьи, четвертые руки. She lived in New York City, but went everywhere with her dog, Oza, an Australian shepherd. As smitten as I was with both of them, I wouldn't have dreamed of asking Vanessa questions about her mother, whom I was fascinated by, but who also reminded me of my mother, an impatient, active warrior who suffers no fools. And so, just a month after the 2001 profile I wrote of Fonda for VOGUE was finished, though not yet published. I was invited to join Vanessa's family and wide circle of friends to attend V-Day, a live benefit performance of Eve Ensler's The Vagina Monologues at Madison Square Garden. It couldn't have been starrier, with Glenn Close, Queen Latifah, and Gloria Steinem. Dozens of actors and rock stars on the stage. Oprah performed in a burqa. Fonda closed the show, the first time she'd done acting of any kind since she married Ted Turner a decade earlier. Beforehand, everyone had gathered in Fonda's enormous hotel suite at the Hilton across the Rockefeller Center to sip white wine. Fonda was then under the spell of Carol Gilligan, the feminist Harvard professor and writer best known for her seminal 1982 work on gender and psychology, In a Different Voice. And she had recently left Turner because she felt stifled by all his manly me-first energy. Enormous, огромный, то же самое, что huge, very, very big. Felt stifled by someone or something, чувствовала себя подавленной, синоним suppressed, depressed. And was sick of shuttling between all his many houses, 13 at that time. She was staying put in Atlanta to be close to Vanessa, who'd moved there to be close to her mother, who had moved there to be with Turner. In a tidy little craftsman bungalow in a groovy neighborhood. Shuttling. Перемещаться, переезжать. Stay put. Наоборот, оставаться на одном месте, стоять на одном месте. Groovy. Стильный, то же самое, что cool, great, gorgeous. Vanessa had recently given birth to Malcolm, Jane's first grandchild, and was raising him on her own. Jane was in the midst of renovation 4 lofts in the same neighborhood as Vanessa's into one enormous space and had hired an artist to paint the foyer to look like a womb. It's the birth canal, she told me in Santa Monica, and it's going to be pink. And suddenly you come through that and 20-foot high ceilings. You are born again into this huge open airy space. She let out a great ghastly laugh. And I have 9 Andy Warhols that will cover one wall. I asked. Me, she said in a hilarious display of self-parodic glee. At one point during the pre-VD gathering at the Hilton, womp, матка, gusty laugh, порывистый смех. Gust – это порыв. Часто его используют в контексте порыв ветра. Gust of wind. Self-parodic glee. Glee – это радость. То же самое, что joy. Fonda suddenly stood up and in a grand actress-y gesture, as if she had just entered stage right, swept across the room toward Rory Kennedy, and then stopped, hitting the mark. "Oh, Rory," she said, "have I told you I've endowed a chair at Harvard?" Dramatic pause. It's no Kennedy school, but it's something. I have been quoting that last bit of dialogue ever since. There was an after party, too, at the Hammerstein Ballroom in Midtown. It was packed, with electricity in the air, everyone having a great time. At one point, I moved to the edge of the room and lit a cigarette, something you could still get away in those days, despite laws that forbade it. Suddenly, I could see Jane drifting through the crowd towards me, Vanessa trailing her. As she arrived, endowed, как participle to или past participle, может употребляться как прилагательное или причастие. Her arm went up and out with 2 fingers extended. She took the cigarette out of my hand, and I thought she was going to admonish me and put it out, but instead, she put it to her lips, took a deep, long drag, and then cocked her head back and blew the smoke towards the ceiling. Vanessa was appalled. "Mom!" This past December, I checked back in with Fonda after all these years. I headed to Washington, D.C. to participate in one of her now infamous Fire Drill Fridays, the weekly rallies she'd been staging mostly on the lawn of the Capitol since October to bring attention to the climate crisis, inspired by Greta Thunberg and teenagers around the world who've been walking out of class on Fridays. Fonda had ended the rallies in civil disobedience with dozens, sometimes hundreds of people. Some of them famous, often including Fonda herself, getting arrested. The Friday I was there was a week before Fonda's 82nd birthday, and it was pouring rain. The participants gathered at St. Mark's Church, a few blocks from the Capitol. Fonda was smiling about in her red coat, the last new piece of clothing I will ever buy, with a black and white houndstooth cap perched gently on her head, looking worried as usual.